Well, good morning and welcome. This is Tampa Home Talk. I'm your host, Katrina Madewell, and this is the halfway point through the year. Welcome.
Yes, it is the halfway point through the year, and plus we get into the swing of hurricane season, sinkhole season, termite fire season. Leo Kane with Beryl Engineering and Inspection, bringing you all the seasons.
My counterpart here joining us.
All the seasons.
And we have a lovely guest this morning, Mr. David Harrow.
Yeah, thank you.
And he is with Geologic Environmental
Testing.
I'm going to try to get this right today, David.
Yeah, we like three words to make that acronym GET. So get whatever you need.
Got it. Okay. Good. I love it. So, all right, let's talk about numbers today, because if you haven't noticed, Leo, we have a full outline and a lot of really cool stuff to talk about with David.
I'm very excited to talk sinkhole. I always love talking sinkhole.
Well, we have a geologist in the house. Like, how cool is that, right? And I was telling David before the show, I'd love to spend a little bit of time talking to residents that are new to the area, that don't understand the geological makeup of Florida, right?
Yeah.
And what to expect here. And I think anywhere you live, you're going to have some stuff, right?
And for the children, we're going to talk dinosaurs.
Okay, we'll talk dinosaurs.
You said we have a geologist in the house. I want to talk dinosaurs.
Okay.
I'm not that kind of expert. But
so the number of he is a geologist.
Yeah, so we should be able to talk about dinosaurs.
Okay.
Yeah, they're the big things with feet on them.
So geologists cross into gemologists at all, or?
No. I say we look at things like black rocks instead of the nice shiny gems.
Rocks?
Yeah, we look at just stuff and go, oh wow.
But the important question is, do you believe that dinosaurs did or didn't have feathers back in the day?
That is a kind of interesting.
I was not even expecting that question this morning.
Well, the dinosaur kick. We got to capture the listening audience.
I don't think so.
But
I don't know.
5 to 15-year-olds listening to us right now.
Is that our audience on YouTube?
That's the one I'm targeting this question for.
I think Horner presented a really good argument with that, with the pelvis being flipped around backwards and the various things that they found. That certainly there's a potential evolutionary process for them to go through. So.
And who's to say there's not some variations, right, of different dinosaurs?
I'm just glad the birds aren't like 20 feet tall,
Yeah.
The ones in the parking lot out there.
Well, the sandhill cranes, were there some out there this morning?
Was that what they were? They were a brown, for all the bird people out there, now I'm attracting the listening audience from 65 to 80. We had the birds, they were brown, they were approximately 4.5 feet tall. They had a beautiful red plumage around their head.
Those are sandhill cranes.
Those were sandhill cranes. There was a lot of them.
Outside today?
Yeah, they were circling your car.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. I'm being serious.
And so my understanding that those go back about 10,000 years.
They do?
Yeah. They've been around a long time. From my understanding. I'm not a ornithologist or anything like that, but
I'm telling you.
So they probably don't wander around quite like the chickens in Ybor, Leo.
Yeah.
But here they wander around a lot and people stop for them, and it's kind of, I guess, in Ybor, they probably stop for the chickens too, right?
Like I said, while we have a geologist on the show, we need to ask him the tough questions about dinosaurs, about birds, about gems.
I'm going to let you do that. I'll give the market update for the morning, and then we'll dive into all the fun geological stuff for the day. So cool stuff we're seeing in the market. It's still relatively hot. Of course, our numbers will vary a little bit going into a holiday weekend. That's pretty normal. But the number of new listings on the market coming in at 705 are sold 821. Does that shift a little bit from last week? I feel like it has.
I feel like it has. I feel like solds are a lot stronger than they were last week. It's like we have a lot pending, and then we don't have as many solds to support the pendings.
It's normal.
This week we have a lot of solds. This week houses are moving off the market, which is a testament to how strong our real estate market's getting.
Again, the sold is still higher than the new listing. So sold coming in at 821, new listing 705, 7-day trend single family homes in 3 counties, and the pending listings are 913.
So we continue to have less inventory than we do home sales, which is driving down what is that factor we always track?
One more little snicker. We're talking about price decreases coming in at 731 for the week. So we had more price decreases than we did new listings at the market.
That's kind of interesting to me, because as we continue to see the new listings being lower than the sold, and we see them lower than pending, when things go back on the market, that's understandable, but price decreases, we're seeing so many price decreases, and our inventory is less than 2 months still?
Yes, we're definitely still less than 2 months, yeah. It's
so
a tight seller's market still. I think people are buying a lot of new construction, the spec homes, I really do. I think there's a lot of that happening right now, and those aren't always reflective in these numbers.
But these new homes are going to these subdivisions where you might very well have a sinkhole.
Well, we're going to talk about that. I'd love to chat from David's perspective, and I'm sure that the builders do geological testing, but there's some cool things that we'll have to talk about as well. I don't know.
Do they?
They got to do some, I'm sure,
Do
right?
they?
I don't know.
How much, David, how much new build construction subdivision stuff do you do?
Well, from my understanding, I mean, they required to do some of them in some of the counties, but they do it kind of at a broad scale, sort of, so it's kind of a little Passover thing.
So,
and,
well, there's a bunch of different ways, right, to test the soil before you build something.
But each individual home is typically not tested. What we've usually have tested particularly are the roads, which the county inherits, and the retention ponds. But the individual home sites are not tested.
Why the retention ponds?
Because they fill up with water and they tend to blow out because of sinkholes typically.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a sinkhole in a retention pond, you basically have a toilet. When you flush the toilet and all the water goes down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the little kids are playing in it.
Yeah, they get sucked down.
All right. Well, today's
alligators in the side of the aquifer that can pop up anywhere.
That's usually a warning sign. If you live on a house with a lake and the lake water all of a sudden disappears, you want to not be in your house.
disappears.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, I just came yesterday from the Winter Park, and there was a swell next to a pond, and a large depression appeared right there, filled with water, but 20 feet from these guys' homes. It was just amazing. I mean, Winter Park is known for the largest sinkhole ever in the state of Florida, and that's what kicked off initially the insurance requirements for homes. Was the threat of this large sinkhole development.
I know it depends, and you can look at the maps to sort of scour around and look at different areas, but where's the highest concentration of sinkholes in the state, would you say?
Nearest the sinkhole attorney's offices.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, come on.
No, it's true.
Statistically,
so where
actually these counties, I mean, Pasco, Hernando County, those
Spring
counties are
Hill's a
kind of
ton.
sinkhole alley. Hillsborough County, it's kind of lumped together with that. And a small portion of Pinellas County, up around Dunedin area, things like that. You typically identified as kind of the sinkhole alley area.
So would you say these areas used to be lush with overflow from rivers and used to have more bodies of water, and as man has done what man does to take away from the environment to build for themselves, it's contributed to the growth of these sinkholes?
Well, certainly. I mean, we saw that in the tragic incident with Mr. Bush out in Plant City, where the water was extracted so much that it developed a sinkhole. And we ran some models after that. We did some drilling out there, and we used that data to run some analytical models. And as what we saw is, as the water table drops into these areas that were identified as potential sinkhole activity, all of a sudden the ground sort of collapsed in. And the model clearly showed how that worked out.
So that was one of my questions, thinking about all this torrential rain that we've had, like just massive amounts of rain in a short amount of time. We talked about how that impacted the roofs last week, Leo, when you were out. How does that impact the soil? So like if you're sucking all the water out, that can create voids. What about if there's an extreme amount of water? Does that have an impact?
Well, it's kind of the opposite effect. A lot of times when you extract the water out, you extract that buoyant force that's holding up those soils and holding up the pressure that's on the soils.
Take away the water and it goes down, right?
Right. And then the other extreme incidence is what you're doing is now you're loading these critical areas that may fail. So with either you get this influx of material moves down, or you can pull the water table down and the soils become weak in that aspect as well.
When there's too much water?
Yeah. When it kind of comes in and there's a weak point, there's a infiltration point through a karst feature or a sinkhole feature, then that can actually focus that increase that downward movement.
So the topic for today's show is unearthing and the secrets of sinkholes. So I'd love to deliver on that show title today.
Okay.
And talk a little bit about, can we back up to just the understanding of sinkhole formation? Can we start there?
Right. So my question to you guys would be, how are glaciers associated with sinkholes?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Is this
I
a
don't
dad
know.
joke? Did you beat me to the dad joke?
Is this a joke or is it legit?
No, it's
information?
legitimate.
Okay, so I think we're going to have to answer that after the break. How are glaciers associated with sinkholes? If you know the answer, text it and I will send you a gift card. I don't know where you have, but I'll send it.
813-377-2775. That's 813-377-2775. If you think you know how glaciers are associated with sinkholes, Text your answer, and if you are correct, Katrina will send you a gift card.
We will. We will. I think it's so cool.
Is this a gift card to a coffee shop?
I don't know.
Is it just a general credit card?
We always
gift
have
card?
the extra gift card somewhere.
Is it going to be to the
If
Blooming
nobody
family?
answers, do I get the gift card?
We'll send you something good. Sure, we can make that happen.
Could I answer and get the gift card? 813-377-2775.
Leo, you're exempt. No.
813-377-2775.
This is Tampa Home Talk.
Don't
We'll
go
be right
anywhere.
back.
We'll be right back. Welcome home. This is Leo Kane with Beryl Engineering and Inspection, talking to my good friend David from the Geologist Environmental Testing Group.
Geologic environmental testing. Yeah.
was the group
Just GET. Get for short. Just yeah.
So is that a name change from the other company, or is?
Yeah, we did the other one is for a lot of times the insurance work we were doing additional forensic stuff, so we didn't want to get pigeonholed into the geologic world. So.
Welcome to the show, David. We're so glad you're here. Thanks for making a nice addition.
Thank you.
All right, so let's go back to your teaser question that was so perfect right before the break. Have you done this before? It was perfect.
No. But you want me to answer that?
How are glaciers associated with sinkholes, right?
Right, exactly. Exactly. So what happened in the geologic past?
Should we let him guess, or do you think he knows the answer?
No. He's on a roll. Let him go.
You sure?
Yeah,
you
I'm
sure, Leo?
Come on. I'm sure.
I was going to let him clean you up.
Okay, so the glaciers that formed the Great Lakes actually pushed down those lakes and formed those. They're huge depression areas. And
so the Great Lakes, we're talking about Michigan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. Those were miles and miles of ice was forming there, and it formed the Great Lakes. And as it did, it sucked up a lot of the water in what's called the eustatic sea level. So that's global sea level changes. So it sucked up a lot of the water in creation of these glaciers, and at the same time, it tilted the continent of the United States upward, bringing the Florida carbonate platform up out of the water.
What?
And exposing the central portion of the carbonate platform. And that's why you see on satellite images all these large circular lake features in the center portion of Florida were developed during that period of time. And they were huge, giant sinkholes that formed during that.
So are you saying that Florida was under water at one point?
The entire platform, it stretches out. It's three times the size. So you would have 3 times the real estate if the sea level would drop to where it was back then. But right now we
lost some.
Yeah, and actually Paleo Indians lived way out in the platform, which is now submerged. They found evidence.
Which would be where? Where would that be right now?
Well, if you looked out, it would kind of like sort of if you took the Panhandle and sort of drew sort of a curved line down to Miami, sort of that side out there.
So somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico?
Yeah, and then it drops off to about 10,000 feet. It's called the Blake Plateau out there, but it's amazing. In this huge platform was limestone, so it's much like the limestone that you see down the Keys and the reefs that are down there. All that formation took millions of years to kind of pile up there, and then once it got subaerial exposure, it got weathered. And that's what kind of happened in our coast, in our area around here. That weathering process is called karst, and it has eroded a lot of the limestone. And this formation of sinkholes and these weathered areas all kind of coincide with some of the development in this area and a lot of the issues that we've had.
I had no idea that the Great Lakes were glaciers.
The more you know.
At one point. That is what you said. Right?
Yes, yeah. And then water, once it melted, it filled up the Great Lakes. It depressed them down. It structurally pressed the continent down at that point in time to those depths, and then filled it back in with water.
So whenabouts did that occur?
The last glaciation was 12,000 years ago, somewhere in that range.
Wow.
Yeah, so you have to think about it. Like with glaciers, if you really think about it, they're constantly slightly thawing and then freezing again and compacting, sucking in more water, slightly thawing and freezing and compacting. So they become really, really dense in that aspect. And then as they slowly move, they just carve the landscape with them.
Yeah, you can see evidence of that in Central Park in New York, where they've scoured across the rock and have made striations in the rock. And then we can see where the glaciers are at.
I bet when you walk around, like when you look at the landscape of wherever you are, it looks very different to you than it does most people.
It does. It's really kind of interesting to me in geology because anywhere we have traveled, we have something interesting looking at, except for subdivisions. And then,
It's kind of like Leo. Like he walks in a house and he finds everything wrong with it.
I'm not allowed to go into my friends' houses anymore.
That's what we talk about. That's a
Just
running
saying,
joke.
just saying.
I never invited him over. Just so you know.
You invited me over once, and what did I say? That one beam was installed wrong.
Which one? Where?
The Land O'Lakes house.
Oh, I don't. Well, you know.
You invited
the
me
other
over,
house.
and you showed me, hey, what do you think of this? And I'm like, this beam is installed wrong. Year and a
Okay.
half later, he's still in construction.
Well, no,
Yeah.
we ripped it out and fixed it, so it's all good now.
Yeah. You ever get to one of those houses? Sometimes you see all this modification, and they ask you what's wrong. You're like, there's just too many things for me to actually list.
I'm just here to drink beer and wine and eat your cheese. Don't ask me about your home.
I won't look at anything. I'll walk in with blinders on like a horse.
No, I'll look at everything. I just won't comment on anything.
That's good.
I can't turn it off.
I did watch some
Oh.
zombie house flipping. We'll come back to that at the end of the show.
awesome.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about the types of sinkholes. Are there different types of sinkholes?
There are. And what you see in the news mainly is this cover collapse, what's called cover collapse sinkhole, where a sinkhole sort of develops and there's a clay layer or something above it that allows it to sort of form a void, an open area. And then after a while, that sort of expands to the point where we call cantilever failure, where the clay units, these stiff clay units, won't hold up anymore and they just suddenly collapse. And that's what really makes the news. But
So where does that stuff go?
It's like an ice cream cone. Think about it. You've got the ice cream cone and you got
Exactly.
the
That's a
one
good
scoop on
analogy.
top. And then you lick the scoop and eventually the scoop falls into the center of the cone.
Yeah, but you can still see the bottom of the cone. With the ice cream cone, you can see the bottom.
Yeah, because as the ice cream falls, there's still more cone underneath.
Well, if you put a little hole in there, it'd melt and go right through there, right?
Onto your hand and then
You know,
goes down your arm.
I think about like that guy in Sefner, right, that was sleeping in his bed and got sucked in. They
Mr.
never
Bush, yeah.
found him again.
Yeah, that sinkhole reactivated after they filled it in. So that's actually one of the premises that we've operated on is that you don't really know exactly what's happening on the subsurface. So a lot of times it's good to make sure of what's going on, and certainly there's as we move into the internet age, the technology is moving forward, and the old engineering ways are sort of not the best anymore.
Are you familiar with that? Did you go see that sinkhole ever?
We did some work, like I said, nearby, and we did some modeling of that because we were actually very close to it, and we did some drilling in there, and we found the water table was very depressed in that area, and that was pretty typical of that area because they water the crops, and it's not really their fault for watering the crops. I mean, they're agriculture, and they were permitted to do what they're supposed to do. But I think overall, as the population and as Florida increases, we're potentially going to run across this issue more and more.
I wish we would do more like rainwater catch type systems, right, for reuse. Wouldn't that make sense, Leo? Because the amount of rain we get.
That works only to a certain extent. I mean, when you're talking about agricultural needs for water, no rain catchment system is going to be large enough.
But some is better than none, right? Would have an impact.
They do that in the islands, but it's very limiting. I mean, you have a catchment under the house, but the problem with Florida is that usually most of those things are built underneath the home. And here in Florida, with the groundwater leaking in there, you couldn't really rely on that. It would leak, bad water would leak into your good water system.
And you're a real estate agent, so if I had a huge blue, let's say, 500-gallon bucket, and I had all the gutters rolling into that 500-gallon bucket, how would that work for a curb appeal?
Well, you could fancy it up. I mean, we had several rain barrels at our last house, and we had a lot of landscape around it. So all the areas where the water would pour off of the roof would go into the rain barrel, and they'd fill up quick.
And this
We'd
was
use it.
shingle roof, metal roof?
Shingle.
Shingle. So would all the granules fall in there and start clogging your rain catchment system?
No, because it had like a big top that was mesh, and it would. No, it didn't. No, it didn't. Mosquitoes didn't bore in there either because of the hole.
Oh, yeah, so you got the mosquito problem from some of these rain catchment
No, it
systems?
had the mesh on top, so it
Right.
didn't.
Well, I think in America, we're used to the really high quality standard of water. I mean, to the point that you can drink it out of the hose if you want to. But in other countries they really struggle with the quality.
Right.
So
Right.
I mean, they get a lower grade quality, and they're sifting stuff sometimes out of retention ponds to get water.
Well, and I was thinking like from the plants aspect, right? Like if you're watering your plants or other things as opposed to using, municipal water. Otherwise, you could use.
I mean, I think from that standpoint, if you're a homeowner, you want to look into a reclaimed water system where they're basically taking wastewater, treating it with chlorine, and then spitting it back out to people to use for irrigation purposes. But as far as farms or any type of mass use of water, that's still these systems aren't going to be.
Okay, so the different types of sinkholes. So we mentioned, how many different types are there?
Usually there's three. There's cover collapse, which we had talked about, and there's cover subsidence, which basically means that, there's not a confining clay layer and the material can kind of move downward. And believe it or not, this causes the most damage to structures.
Is this one that slowly kind of drops down? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. Or, sometimes it can be soils that are over an old karst feature that just kind of compress slowly. They're not an active sinkhole condition, but they're actually kind of subsiding, and I've got a couple of cases like that right now. The new construction that are out there that having an issue with that. They actually had built over an old relic or paleo sinkhole, and those soils are just kind of compressing down through there. So that kind of does that. Then there's the last kind is kind of sort of a solution type of sinkhole, and then that's where the existing pathways are just enlarged. And they kind of take this material. But a lot of those
underground, is that what you're talking about? Okay.
Yeah, a lot of those times in shallow areas, and they don't really cause a whole lot of damage that way.
So, I mean, Florida's built on Swiss cheese, right? And so I'm definitely not a geologist. I work in the house realm, right? Like the stuff you can see and I can fix. Yeah. But my husband is a diver, and he was watching some show one time on National Geographic. And for example, some of these shows, I'll see the houses and I'll literally recognize some of them and know that they're in or around Tampa. So from my perspective, that's what I see. So I started watching a piece of the show with him, and I don't watch TV. It's like the running joke, right? Yeah. But literally there was a diver underground in the cavern. There was somebody on top, and this guy was walking through neighborhoods to follow the diver underground.
That was Wesley Stiles and Peter Butts. Yeah, Peter, I've worked with, or was...
Let's talk about that when we come back. Stick around. It's Tampa Home Talk.
Adam Talley with Talley Insurance popping in for the third segment here. And Katrina, you said you guys were talking?
Yes, we have Mr. David Harrow in the studio today. He is a geologist with Geologic Environmental Testing, GET.
Yeah.
And oh yeah. Did you? What was the question we asked? What do glaciers and sinkholes have in common? Was that the question?
Yeah. That was.
You're gonna have to listen to the podcast or the YouTube replay to find out.
Yeah, make sure you smash the like button and subscribe button to get your weekly update from Tampa Home Talk brought to your inbox.
Some fun with some good stuff always.
Doesn't play, so listen to podcasts on my AirPods while I drive, which is not fun. But
well, you can download last week's episode then.
I should, but I'm at the airport, so I don't need to. But anyways, if we're talking about sinkhole, we should talk about how sinkhole coverage is excluded.
Yes.
With pretty much every single policy, but you do get catastrophic ground cover collapse, which, for the real big ones that can pop in and help you out. But, it's, these carriers make it extremely difficult to get sinkhole coverage. Mm-hmm. They all offer it. However, the process to get it is costly, time-consuming, and there's no guarantee, right?
Okay, let's just make this clear. Adam, they offer it, but you're not going to get it.
Yeah.
Right? Or you'll be paying more for it than you would ever want to pay
Well,
for
I think one of the other questions, too, is that, if there's previous sinkhole activity or repaired sinkhole, getting that through the insurance process sometimes can be challenging.
We have two carriers that'll do it. With standard carriers. We have Citizens, of course, and they want the engineer's report, they want all the stuff that shows it's been remediated. And then we have Edison will do it as well. I've never written one with Edison that adds a prior sinkhole, but it is in their underwriting guidelines that they will take it and review it. But like anything else these days with carriers, most of them are looking for reasons not to write the business. unfortunately, the underwriting guidelines are so strict these days that they're really, really tightening up
Yeah.
on what they're going to do.
So just to be clear on that, I mean, the catastrophic ground collapse, for that to actually kick in, the municipality has to deem your home not habitable, right?
Correct. Yeah. So you remember the one in God, it was like Defner.
Yeah.
Where the guy was like sleeping in his bed.
Yes.
And, like, if you go there right now, that is just a field of nothing.
Right.
Like that is catastrophic. Like, not only you can't live there, nobody can live there. I mean, the houses that were next to it also got demolished. Like that's catastrophic. But on this, if you have sinkhole coverage, you probably have a 10% sinkhole deductible. So if your average coverage A, which is your dwelling limit, is like $300,000 to $350,000, I mean, you're talking $30,000 to $35,000 out of pocket before the insurance would pick up anyways, even if you had the coverage.
Would they pay off the house? Like, I mean, it's not habitable, so wouldn't they have to make you whole? Or what if the house is paid off? You have to write you a check for the difference? You can't live there.
It has nothing to do with being paid off. It would just be your limit.
Mm-hmm. Limits of coverage.
If the house is unlivable, then it's unlivable, right? Your dwelling limit would apply. If it's in the case like the one in Land O' Lakes where it's swallowed up like an entire house, I'm assuming they just made policy limits and moved on with their life, right?
So basically, in your instance, $300,000 dwelling coverage, $30,000 off, they're going to get a check for $270?
If they had sinkhole coverage, but if it's something like that, I mean, there's probably the catastrophic cover.
I was going to say, they wouldn't need sinkhole coverage for that because it's going to cover it.
Yes.
Non-hurricane deductible. In most cases, it's $1,000 or $2,500.
Right. So if you have catastrophic ground collapse and your house gets swallowed up, then why would you need the sinkhole coverage to begin with? Won't you be covered just under the normal policy?
Yeah.
Yeah, you would. Well, we were just talking about sinkhole coverage. So you wouldn't necessarily need sinkhole coverage in that instance, but there's instances where sinkholes, arise where the house isn't deemed unlivable. I mean, obviously there's houses out there that have been remediated, so it's that gray area in between that can get pretty costly.
Right.
The geological bad part.
Yeah, I actually seen a paper produced by one of the local consultants here that identified the conditions in the subsurface and then called that catastrophic without the structure being totaled out at this point. So, I mean, certainly if you detect that early in the process, you may be able to, push that forward and have them take a look at that.
Well, let's actually talk about that in a second. But I guess before we do, let me ask you the $1 million question, because I get this all the time. And I know the answer technically is definitely, it always depends, right?
Yeah.
On how it was repaired, who the company was, all that stuff. But all the times people will say, is a sinkhole house better than a non-sinkhole house? So a house that's had a sinkhole and it's been repaired, it's had grout injections and underpinning and the whole gamut.
Well, I'm probably, I don't know if I'm the lone voice out there, but there were a lot of companies that did underpinning and did that underpinning very shallow, and I think Leo could probably contest to that. And those things are not tied into rock, and so I don't really qualify those as actual repairs.
So, but I'm not talking about just underpinning. What if it was underpinned well, right, and it's had grout injections?
$200,000 of grout.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's throw a number
Do you
out
think
there.
that house is better and safer than one that's never had a sinkhole?
I think it would really, again, it would really depend on the initial conditions. If the initial conditions were mild or very, low in the detection process, if you had something where you had a large, concern like over 20 or 30 feet, a concern in the subsurface, then that may not have addressed everything. Not that we used to call it pump and pray back in the day, but it used to be something that we would address. But if the conditions of the initial analysis determined, I mean, it was only like small conditions in the subsurface, and then it was extensively grouted, those are probably much safer. But the best thing to do is to have somebody like Leo or myself take a look at the report and render an opinion to you that that, hey, this looks good or not.
So let's talk about some of the new technologies, right, that you guys are working on, or it's already out, or what's the situation with that?
Oh, it's already out.
Yeah.
So let's talk about it.
Yeah. So,
I guess we'll talk about that. Actually, before we do, let's talk about what should somebody look for, right? Like, who's a good candidate for this technology before we talk about the technology?
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? Like, what kind of signs do homeowners look for?
Well, actually, I mean, this part of the things we developed this for is because a lot of the homes that were identified as sinkhole homes are living next door to someone who's never had any assessment, right? And they may be sandwiched between, several properties that had sinkhole investigations, because it propagated through all these neighborhoods pretty rapidly, and a lot of people had it and a lot of people didn't. So certainly if these people had a lot of conditions in there, or there have been known sinkhole collapses within that area, then certainly you're a candidate. I think the recent one, Lake Scott, opened up, and they have all these houses right next to it. The one I was talking to you in Winter Park, I mean, I would be they're 20 feet away from this feature. So certainly those are there. In addition to that, again, when I said the homes that we felt like maybe they really weren't properly repaired, may be a candidate for it as well.
So we were talking about
sold.
the new subdivisions, right? You're saying they probably didn't test everything so well. They're not testing every lot, yada yada yada.
No, certainly.
So let's say it's a brand new neighborhood, someone's moved in. What kind of signs and things should they be looking for so that they can do this testing and monitoring, that sort of stuff? What are some things to tip off a homeowner to look for?
Well, I mean, certainly, there's the threshold right now has been increased since 2012. The Florida statute is basically saying you have to have structural damage in there. So a few little cracks and stuff like that, doesn't really qualify the structure for being, sinkhole damage
but is that an indicator, like we all know the laws change, right? And the insurance rules have changed. But with your expertise opinion, being a geologist, when you start to see those cracks, do you think it's soil related, or do you think it's all the people in the house and the cars and the stuff?
Well, to be honest to you, my first go-to is I look at how it was constructed, whether it was the lot was prepped properly, whether there's any other mitigating circumstances, the simplest thing first. And so that's kind of what we look at, and then we start to get into the more complex issues. So in other words, we don't want to go out there and look at a couple cracks and go, oh my God, you have a sinkhole. There's a lot of reasons why that could exist. And not, all these structures fall into, it has to be a sinkhole because you have stair-step cracking. But that's been a thing that's been propagated out there by people who made a lot of money from that, But basically what you need to understand is that a thorough evaluation that covers these things, and then you progress that evaluation onto it. Certainly, if you're starting to see extreme conditions in the home, then yes,
right.
You're starting to see
Give some
depressions in the
examples.
yards.
Okay. So a little opening up in the yard.
Yeah, the floor levels start. The interior starts to move downward. You can kind of feel it's moving downward like that. If you put roller skates on, you roll to the other side of the house.
Okay.
Those kind of things.
Windows and doors not opening and closing properly.
That's a really kind of. I kind of like that one a little more because that means the interior has moved around enough to cause this problem. And usually, by the time it translates into the interior, I don't know, Leo, if that. But at that point, you're really starting because you can have stair-step cracking and everything inside be fine. But once it starts translating inside of the structure and start moving that drywall and cracking that drywall and doing those things, to me, that's a lot of stress has to happen at that point in time.
What else, Leo? What else should people be looking for that might tip them off that something might be going on?
I mean, the easiest things are is your fence starting to suck into the ground? Because no amount of house settlement is going to cause fencing to go in. So if you got depressions in the yard, fencing is what we look for. Another thing to look for too is if there's dirt in your drinking water, because you got to think if the ground's moving and your plumbing pipe breaks, your water supply, you'll get some dirt or sediment in the pipe, and that'll translate over into the drinking water.
Yeah. That's a good one. Yeah, that would be a good one.
Car disappears, your couch disappears, your wife and your truck disappear with the dog on a Friday night.
Your wife could disappear without it being a sinkhole.
813-377-2775. That's 813-377-2775. If your wife took the dog and your truck and it was never seen from again and you think it might be a sinkhole,
text the word. George involved. It's going to go south quick.
Or a lawyer, or a letter from a lawyer.
Get a letter from a lawyer. But 813-377-2775. We can help you find your truck as long as it's got some kind of GPS system in it.
When we come back, we'll talk about the sinkhole alert technology and some listings
we have some
that
listings.
we have.
This
listings. Is Tampa Home Talk, 813-377-2775. We'll be back.
This is Leo Kane with Beryl Engineering and Inspection. Yeah, the little
technology
technical difficulties with the YouTubes. I apologize, Mr. and Mrs. YouTube watcher. Make sure you hit smash like, subscribe. People on Facebook, we appreciate you. Send them little heart emoji icons flowing. We love watching that happen. Share the show. Share the love. Retweet, re-speak, re-energize, reduce, reuse, recycle.
Yeah, so today's topic, we're talking all about sinkholes and sinkhole monitoring. David Harrow is our guest of the hour. And let's talk about this really unique little thing you guys have to monitor.
I love this
Sinkhole.
device. Let's talk a little bit about it. This is great for subdivisions. This is great for condominium associations. This is great for areas prone with sinkholes. There is a revolutionary item that we can shove in the ground. Take it away, David.
How big is it? How does it work?
Oh, well, that's interesting. Firstly, let me just kind of go over a little bit how we got to the point of developing it. And we had developed, this is a patented technology, and we had developed another patented geophysical imaging technique that would see very, very clearly and deep in the ground. And what we could see was the actual sinkhole throats. So after we began mapping this and going through this for years, we kept looking we're like, well, what's the next step for people need to understand? We're starting to see these sinkhole throats.
What is that? Can you describe that for the person listening?
Yeah, basically it's kind of the opening in the limestone. We could actually see where that opening was, if it was large enough. It was small, obviously not, but these were very large scales, up to 50 to 100 feet in nature. And we could see these things, and we did it for the DOT and energy companies and stuff like that, and we were able to identify these potential risks. But we thought, what was the next thing we needed to do? So we said, well, we needed to find out whether these things are active or not. And if they're dormant, if they're just sitting there, then they don't have to do a lot except for maybe monitor it. Now, if you were to grout this or do something like that, the standard approach, it would cost millions of dollars. So we developed we started with developing a technique based off of what's called time domain refractometry. And Dr. Kevin O'Connor first started experimenting with the use of this. So basically all it is it pulses the cable just like your cable TV guy pulses your cable to determine whether the cable's broken or not. And what they did was they just drilled a hole, grouted it, put the cable down in there, and they pulsed it. And during a landslide or some other movement, catastrophic movement, this cable would become damaged, and it would record that so they could see that in there. But we realized in Florida that you couldn't make a grout hole and that the sands moving around wouldn't affect it very much. So we had to come up with a different approach. And that approach was a preloaded sensor that has a point in a heavy spring system on it and a sliding mechanism inside of it that we compress down into the ground and we push it against the soil. And then we pulse that with this electrical pulse. And it comes back to us as a signal. And we start to see that signal. And when it deploys, that signal changes. It's called electrical impedance. So we start to see that change, and then from that, we constructed the device so that it would automatically call, SMS, or text you that this thing has activated, and now you need to come pay attention to it.
So how does it connect? Is it Wi-Fi? Is it satellite?
We're actually using coax, the same cable, coaxial cable.
Okay.
Same thing. And we wanted it to be, we wanted the distribution of this to be that way because also it was used prior in this time domain refractometry, and it's reasonably cost. If it gets damaged, it can be easily fixed. So the maintenance portion of it is, we thought long term, it'd be easy.
What is the cost of it to do it? What's the maintenance cost on it? How does that work?
Well, overall, right now, what we're looking at for the condo associations, things like that, since they're so large and they're going to require a lot of these things, we're trying to structure that as a low entry cost point for them, and then a kind of a a monitoring fee that they can assess to each one of the condos, and depending on their size, then that could be distributed for them over the period of time.
What if it was just a single family home in one of these neighborhoods we've been chatting about this show, like just a regular home?
Yeah, I've put these in. It's been on the order of 7 to 10. But that,
100,000, how much?
1,000, yeah, 10,000.
So 7 to 10,000.
Yeah.
And then what's the cost to maintain it, and what's involved with that?
Well, it just sort of feeds out. You have to have internet access, which most homes have these days, and then everybody, which is really, the technology. We're allowed to propagate this technology because back in the day you didn't have this, and a lot of the engineers kind of got stuck in that. We needed to just drill and test, and that's it. We don't really need to rely on technology. So that has to be accessible. If it's a structure that doesn't have it, then it has to be put in there for that. And then periodically the sensors are checked to make sure they're operational. So that periodic maintenance that goes along with that.
Is that quarterly, or how does that work?
More, it's I think we've been pulling them, and so it's been about a year or two. So we go in there about after a year or two and kind of check them.
So
and make
7
sure.
to 10,000 to put it in, like on a single family home, and then every couple years, what's the cost?
Kind of maintenance costs on that. It depends if the probes need to be replaced or not with that.
So what's the range on that?
Well, just to kind of come out to take a look, everything's probably in the $1,000 range or something like that. Just
and if
to
there's repairs that need to be made?
Yeah, those are individually priced on that. We haven't got to all of that cost structure
So it's still new. You're still working through some of those.
Yeah. We're trying to figure out if we can actually get that down to a little lower cost for everybody and make it more like a single monitoring. But the thing of it is that any monitoring system that you have, whether it's monitoring your car's oil or your burglar alarm, you're hoping that this thing doesn't go off. But when it does, you understand. Thank God I have this.
So when it goes off, you're saying that's major movement at that point.
At that point, we're saying you're definite. You've got an issue.
So how is this like an early adoption thing? Has it been tested a lot? Are you still in a little bit of the early testing phase? Like, where are you with this?
Well, like I said, I think we just acquired confirmation for the U.S. patent for this, and we have been testing it over the last 5 years on 25 properties we've had it over this period of time. And really, these were identified sinkhole conditions that we put these things into. I mean, right in the location the previous reports had said there's sinkhole activity here. And so far to date, we really...
So what was your thinking on that, to see if they reopened, or what was your thought behind that?
Well, these were properties that were at risk. They had not been repaired.
So they were ones that have
not been repaired.
Got it.
And basically are just sitting there, and they have these conditions, and it's unknown to them. So it's unknown whether this condition is going to result in a catastrophic failure or not.
Wow. I feel like we could continue this conversation for another hour, don't you, Leo?
We could. We didn't even get to my listings.
Let's do them real quick. Let's give out the addresses, some quick information, and we'll give out our number.
18890 Deer Tracks Loop. And it's in Lutz, Florida.
Lutz.
And that's $525,000 for this
LA Lutz area.
for this 2015 build, 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. And then we've got 8145 Tar Hollow Drive in Gibsonton, Florida. $369,000 for this 2006 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms.
We'll give you more information on these great properties. 813-377-2775. 813-377-2775. Love where you live, or we'll fix it. Welcome home.